What's happening, Boot Junkies? Mike Dog Audio here, back with another video on home studio setup for voiceover. And we have a new microphone in the booth to talk about today. If you're interested in dynamic microphones, this is the Samson Q9U. Let's see if we can get that without a shadow. The Samson Q9U broadcast dynamic cardioid pattern microphone. New microphone from Samson to compete in the space that's popular for podcasting and Twitch streaming and so forth. Folks that are looking for a dynamic microphone that might be well suited towards a somewhat non-optimal recording space if you're not in a booth like I am. I'm recording in my booth today because I want you to hear the performance of the microphone, and I want to talk about all of its features, and I want to help you decide if this is the right microphone for you. I'm not going to make a recommendation either way, but I want you to hear it. I'll let the microphone speak for itself, and I'll let you decide if you think it's the right thing for you. We'll talk about some of its pros, some of its cons, and just give you my overall impressions. Sound good? Right up front, I do want to say that the kind folks over at Samson did send this microphone to me. They asked me if I'd like to review it. I said yes. My compensation is that I get to keep the mic. I'm not paid. No other compensation than I get to keep the microphone. They don't get any say on what I say if I was going to make the video at all. They don't get any input. They don't get any editorial feedback. They see this video at the exact same time you do. There's no feedback to them. I just want to give you my impressions. Sound good? All right, cool. So let's talk about what this microphone has, some of its different features, when you might use it. First off, this is a combination microphone. By combination, I mean it's both a USB microphone and an XLR microphone. So you can use it in two different situations, which is really handy. This is a really handy thing. If you're just starting out, you're making your first microphone selection, and you're like, I can't afford to buy several pieces of equipment. I don't even know how all of that different equipment works. I just want a microphone to hook to my computer. Then you would normally choose a USB microphone. Perfectly fine, especially if you're just starting out. So this microphone is a USB microphone. Comes with a couple of different cables, a USB A to C and a USB C to C. So no matter what kind of USB port you have on your computer, it will connect to this microphone, USB A or USB C. It's USB C on the microphone, though. You can plug it in that way. Right now I've got it plugged in using the XLR cable. So along your career path, as you're talking into a microphone, you may decide over the course of time that you'd like to upgrade some of the equipment. Maybe you'd like to get a better preamp, or maybe you'd like to introduce a channel strip, something called maybe a DBX286, maybe something to try and improve or change the quality of the sound. You might want to add equipment down the road. By doing that, you would switch over to use the XLR microphone, the XLR jack, to hook it up to the other equipment. So really handy from the Samson's perspective is it can be part of a logical upgrade path as you want to improve your studio setup over time. USB and XLR. For me, that was like the number one feature right off the bat. Is really helps you from a voice acting perspective make a recommendation to say, yeah, this is a USB mic you could consider. I did try and hook it up to my phone. So if you're like into Clubhouse or something like that, if you wanted to try and add this microphone and just like stick it right into your iPhone, my experience is you can't just plug this thing directly into a phone. Neither of my phones, my Android or my iPhone, I could not just plug this thing in and make it work. You would have to make it work through something like a powered hub. So you couldn't just make this like an on. I don't know that this microphone, I'm not sure how many microphones you can just plug right in. This one doesn't have, the phones can't supply enough power to make the microphone do its thing, if you would. So you'd probably need a powered hub or something like that. I couldn't just plug the phone in and make it work. There's a couple of different features on the microphone that can adjust its sound. And this is sort of hearkening to another more popular, significantly more expensive dynamic microphone, and that's the Shure SM7B. We'll do a sound comparison between these two in a couple of minutes, but there's a couple of switches on this microphone that allow you to adjust the sound to try and tailor it to your voice. Right now you're listening to it in its flat mode. There's no frequencies cut or boosted or anything like that. For some voices, if you're talking over music, so if you're playing music behind your Twitch stream or something like that, you may find that your voice would benefit by having the mids accentuated a little bit so it cuts through or allows you to be heard over sometimes with the music. And so there's a switch on the top that says mid. And right now, gosh, I hope, yeah, it's set in the flat setting, so there's a line. If I switch it over to the mid setting, you will hopefully notice a bit. Let's see if I can do this. Yeah, I felt it switch. So you switch over to something called the mid setting. So it boosts the mid range of the voice, makes it a little bit more present. And that's similar to a switch that's on the back of the SM7B. There's a switch to improve its presence or to boost its presence. And that just adds a little bit of mid-range to your voice. And you should hear that it sounds a little bit different as now that I've switched that switch. So you switch it off and the mid-range sort of dies down a little bit, makes my voice a little bit flatter, and you can boost the mid-range. It's just a choice. Whether you like it or not, you can put the switch however you want. Okay. Below that is another switch. The switch on the bottom is what they call a high-pass filter or a bass roll-off filter. And what that does is that reduces the very lowest frequencies to try and make the microphone perform better, to overcome the natural bassiness that happens as you get closer and closer to the microphone. And if you have rumble in your studio, many studios that are not treated studios like mine will have a general rumble. It might be the street that's outside. It might be the air conditioner, might be your fan, might be your desk, where there's some rumble that comes into the microphone. It could come from maybe from handling the mic. So you see people that they want to touch the mic a lot. The bottom switch, the bass roll-off, can remove some of that very lowest frequency. So if you switch it, it should sound... Yeah, I switched it, so it's hard to hear in the headphones, but I switched it now so that there's a little bit less bass. It's pretty subtle. According to the documentation, it's about 3 decibels starting up and like over 100 hertz, maybe even at 200 hertz. Let me just look at I've got the documentation right down here. Yeah, it says it cuts it by 3 decibels starting at 200 hertz. It's actually it's a fairly high roll-off. I would normally expect it to start at like 80 hertz and down, but a much steeper roll-off. So it says it cuts low frequencies by 3 dB at 200 hertz. So they're saying it's as much a voice demudder as a high-pass filter. One of the things that happens, especially with male voices, is in the 200 to 300 hertz range, frequently, there can be a buildup of bass frequencies. I don't know if it's resonance from the chest or where it comes from, but there tends to be a slight muddiness that can happen with male voices. And so by switching the switch, let's make it flat again and see if we can hear the difference between it. But you may notice that there's a slight buildup of the bass tone in my voice. And sometimes if you switch that switch, you can see my voice still sounds like my voice, but it's clearer now. With my professional microphones, like right now I've got this $1,000 shotgun hooked up. I add that in my equalization. I actually take about 2 decibels out at 250 hertz to demud my voice. And so this switch will take care of it for you, that bass switch. Pretty handy. But it's not super aggressive, according to what it says. It does not show a diagram. Interestingly, the documentation does not show a diagram of how that slope goes. So I'm not sure exactly like how aggressive it is as it goes down lower in the frequency spectrum. I don't know. So we're just going to go by how it sounds. Okay, so those are the equalization switches. I'm going to switch them back to flat just so you can hear sort of the natural way the microphone sounds. Flat. Cool. There's one more feature on the microphone that I think is super handy, and gosh, I've wished in this world of video conferencing that this feature was present in many of my other microphones. And that's this button right here on the top. This button is a mute. If you press the mute button off, it will turn off the microphone automatically. So you can just press one button and the microphone mutes itself. That's a really handy feature, and virtually no other microphone. Certainly, I don't think I have any other XLR microphones where I can just deactivate it right there. So I can. I can use it as a cough button if I'm doing a podcast. I could use it as a mute button when I'm on a Zoom conference like that and just press it to talk, press it to mute myself. Really, really handy feature. And in this world of video conferencing, and we spend our lives in front of screens talking to other people, having that mute button is really, really handy. You get 2 USB cables. You get a fuzzy clown nose pop filter that can go on the end. We'll slide that on in a second. And you get the microphone already attached to its rigid mount. It seems to be that it's not designed to be removed from this mount. It is designed to be added, to be retained in this mount. It's sort of friction. There's sort of a friction aspect to it that allows you to adjust the microphone into its different positions. Let's bring another microphone in just as a point of comparison. So now you're listening to the SM7B. Let me just make sure that that's in its flat settings. Yeah, my 7B is in its flat settings. And flat. Yeah, okay, so both microphones are now in their flat settings. We should notice that there's something of a sound difference between them, and I'll switch back and forth between the microphones a little bit so you can get a sense of sort of how they differ in tonality. They should differ in tonality. That's not unusual for the microphones, and you can decide which one is the sound that's right for you. I've got these both the same distance from my mouth, and I'm closer to the microphone than I think the manufacturer. In Samson's thing, they want you to be, let me just look at the documentation. Yeah, so Samson's documentation suggests 4 to 12 inches away from the microphone. I'm closer than that. I think from a dynamic perspective, especially if you're in a less than ideal treated space, that you want to be a little bit closer to the dynamic microphones. That may introduce some pop filtering, the need for pop filtering, so you may get some plosives into the microphone. Seems to do pretty good from a plosive rejection directly built in with the windscreen, but you do get the pop filter. So I'm just going to go and slide this on, just so we have some parity with the SM7B. So we've got both filters. We may notice that it takes ever so little. A little bit of the highs away. This is a fairly thick clown nose to put on it. So it may make the sound a little bit darker, take some of the highs away by adding that pop filter. This is with the pop filter on. This is with the pop filter off. Pop filter on. So I think it does. From what I can tell as I listen in the headphones, it maybe does get a little tiny bit, tiny bit. Almost imperceptibly, but it does get a little bit darker. The Shure generally comes with this foam filter installed. There's also like a great big one that you can put on it. I just don't have it here with me. A couple of things that I've noticed, and the reason I brought the SM7B in is, one, the form factor, at least from the back half of the microphone, the form factor is very similar between the Samson and the Shure. Now, I think the Shure executes it a little bit better than the Samson. I think I like the way Shure executes its the microphone body and the holder, the mount, a little bit better. And that is the SM7B is ever so slightly tapered. The microphone body itself is tapered. So when it's being adjusted, let's switch over to the 7B. Yeah, we're on the 7B. So as I adjust it, the microphone can be pointed up just a little bit towards my mouth. It can go a little bit beyond 90 degrees, and it can point up at my mouth a little bit. Whereas the body of the Q9U is straight. So the microphone in its mount is always stuck at 90 degrees. So I can't really point it up at my mouth. So I'm editing the video, and I went to clip this image to try and show you a little bit of a clarification on what I'm talking about. So I was using a desk stand with a boom arm so that I could have room under the keyboard. Have the mic come over the keyboard with a boom arm. That was limiting the range of motion that would prevent it from being angled. But if you're using something like a scissor mount, as probably most people will be, so that they can keep it above their desk, you see that so long as you hang the microphone straight down, you do have plenty of clearance so that you can angle the microphone however you want. That's no problem. I just wasn't quite explaining it right with the limitation of the boom arm. I should have mentioned that there was a boom arm in play there that would affect it, a rigid boom arm, whereas these scissor mounts where it can hang straight down, that's totally fine. But now I realize as I look at this image, now that I'm going to include it, that the image itself is actually wrong. They're displaying it with an XLR cable and headphones. You can't do that with this microphone. That won't work. This would have to be a USB cable because USB can provide power that would power the headphone amplifier. XLR won't work. And with phantom power, even with phantom power turned on, I thought maybe there was some magic behind the scenes that would make it work with phantom power. I checked, doesn't work. So this picture shows XLR and headphones. You can't do that. This would have to be USB to run the headphones. Anyway, so hopefully that clarifies how you can angle the microphone in the stand, but also how you connect it to your computer. From the front, from the business end forward, the design of the Q9U is actually more reminiscent of some of the Rode dynamic microphones, and I think they really all get their design from this Electro Voice RE20 form factor. So let's switch over now to the EV, a significantly more expensive microphone, and just see how this one compares. Let's switch that over real quick. Now we've got the Electro Voice RE20 dynamic microphone plugged in, and we can get a comparison of the sound between these two microphones. I should make sure. Let's switch it. It was on. Let's switch it off. So now you're getting the full sort of match to match. This one is, I turned the high pass filter off. But you can see from the design of it that the front here, it's got this vented look to it that does sort of ape the Electro Voice. So the design from the front with these vents, I think they're there to try and offset the proximity effect. As you get closer and closer to the microphone, you get a little bit more bass. The Electro Voice is sort of known for rejecting any proximity effect. So as I get closer to it, my voice really doesn't change. And that is part of the design of the microphone itself. As I get closer to the Samson, I do think I get a little bit bassier. Now, I can switch that off by engaging the high pass filter to try and offset that proximity effect. So now I'm right up on that microphone. We'll switch over to the RE20, get right up onto that microphone, and we'll be able to see if there's a significant difference between them. But I do find that front, I think that's where they maybe get that styling from it. It's part of the design of the EV in order to offset that proximity effect. It's sort of one of the features that they've had, hallmark of this microphone, forever and ever and ever, these vents on the side to try and offset that proximity effect. The build quality of the Samson, I will say, is top-notch. I was really impressed. It's got a good heavy weight to it, feels very robust, no handling noise. It feels like a solid microphone. I do have a couple of small criticisms of it, and that comes where the mounting point is. It's designed to just be this sort of friction. Let's just put it over here. It's just designed for this friction mount. So you can move the microphone into any different position and it will stay there, but it does not seem to be adjustable. At least not easily. Maybe there are these plastic caps on the side. Maybe there's a screw under there in order to tighten it. Should these become loose, should that friction sort of lose its gusto, its holding power? But I don't know. It seems to always just want to be friction fit, which over time, maybe that will be a durability issue. Who the heck knows? It could take years for that to happen. I have no way of knowing, but I do wish that I could tighten that and just sort of lock it into place so that even if I handled it, I couldn't inadvertently move it. It's something that I wish we could do, but you can't. So at least not any way that I can see, no evidence of it. Okay, so let's now switch this over to be a USB microphone and see how it performs in that respect. Okay, so now we've got the microphone set in USB mode, and now we've switched over to using the preamplifier that's built inside the microphone itself, which should be a little bit different. So we may notice that there's a somewhat different sound-wise between the Audient preamp that I use in my studio and the built-in preamplifier. I expect it may sound a little bit different, but this is using power from the computer to power the microphone. All the other buttons and switches still work, so the mute, everything else still works. But instead of being controlled by my DAW, it's controlled now by the system preferences. So the volume control that will either be in Windows or in Mac, that will adjust the gain and how loud the feedback is in the headphones. So there's a headphone jack right here that allows you to plug the headphones in to get zero latency monitoring. I can hear it just as if I was hooked up to an interface. But in order to adjust the gain or to adjust the volume in the headphones, we do that all within the system itself. What I've found is the preamplifier on the microphone seems to be fairly reasonably set right there in the middle. It's got some pretty good power to it, but there's a bit of a click that as you go in between the sort of the 50% point, I think there's some weird voltage thing that happens when it's sending power over the USB cable, that as I switch the volume right past the midpoint, there's a little bit of click and dropout. It's this funny sounding thing. So I don't know if that's a firmware thing. I don't know if it's just this microphone. I don't know if that's inherent to all of them, but I did notice that adjusting that volume is kind of a little bit goofed up right at the midpoint on my Mac. I don't know what the cause of that is. So this is really going to be one of those things that, hopefully you just sort of set it and forget it. But I'm not sure how you change that. Let's see. So it doesn't seem to affect the volume. So the headphone amplifier part doesn't suffer from that same effect. So I can change the volume of my headphones, no problem. But there is that little bit of a click right there at that midpoint. I don't know what that is. Anyway, but as far as a USB microphone, perfectly fine. It's got plenty of signal. I don't have to turn it all the way up. Everything else works just fine. So I've been, impressed. I won't use this as a USB microphone. It's not important for me from a testing perspective, but you should at least know about that click as you're using it. But other than that, the microphone comes with all the connectivity you need in order to make this microphone work with a computer. As I said, I was not able to connect this directly to a phone. You would need to maybe use a powered hub, or you could use an XLR to a powered USB interface and have that interface connect to your phone. So if you wanted to use this for something like Clubhouse, if that was going to be important to you, you would need probably some additional connectivity. Okay, so this is the USB mode, and hopefully that helps. Should sound like a microphone. The quality, I sort of chuckle there because the quality of the USB is far less important for me. I think from a USB perspective, I want it to be loud and clear. In my experience, it's got a little bit more hiss underneath it because I think the preamplifier that's built into the Samson is just not spectacular. So there's more underlying hiss. We should hear it as we turn it up. You can hear that underlying hiss. It's fairly prevalent, and that's just the nature of the inexpensive preamps that are built inside the microphone. At this price point, that makes sense. Okay. All right. So now we're going to do one more test and see if we can make this work, see how it works with a DBX286. So far we've seen this microphone perform against two much more common, much more famous microphones. So the SM7B and the RE20, two really famous microphones. They're also significantly more expensive, so it's not really been a fair comparison. But I know that that's like top of mind, what people want to compare this microphone to. How will it sound against these two sort of mega microphones that are everywhere in your head? And it sounds different. Doesn't sound nearly the same as those microphones. Right, and that's about what we expected. This is a USB microphone. It costs significantly less, so it's going to sound different. And I think it doesn't sound as good as those microphones. But hear me out on this. So if you're thinking about buying a 7B, you're looking at a dynamic microphone and maybe even waiting for the Q9U to come out. Like maybe this is the one at $199. Yeah, okay, by itself, I don't think it's a replacement for a 7B or an RE20. But at half the price, there's a value proposition that I think we should talk about because I want to be fair to this microphone. If you go and you buy a 7B, if you're going to buy an RE20, the thing that you'll always hear with those microphones is they require a lot of gain. When I had them here on my preamplifiers, the gain was turned all the way up, all of these microphones, it's turned practically all the way up because these my preamps provide about 64 decibels of gain. If you have some of the more entry-level interfaces that only provide 50 decibels of gain, the complaint you're going to have is this microphone is not very loud. I can't turn it up enough. And so the thing that you'll always hear with those microphones, any of these microphones, is, oh, well, yeah, if you're going to have a dynamic microphone for your consumer-grade interface, you're going to need to buy a cloud lifter, you're going to need to buy a fed head, you're going to need to buy one of those little dynamite things, or you might need to buy a channel strip, especially if you're thinking about doing this for live streaming. You probably want to get a channel strip, and the one that's really famous is the DBX286. And so I've got it plugged into a DBX286 now, and I've messed around with some of the knobs. The DBX286 is a channel strip. In other words, it's a preamplifier, and it has some other effects that can change the tone of the microphone. It's got a compressor. It's got this enhancer for your voice, and it's got a gate that can take away some of the background noise, some of the background hiss. But the value proposition that I think is here is at $200 for this microphone, and the DBX286 at, I think it's $220 right now. That together is essentially the same price. It's within $20 of the price of the SM7B alone, and I think it costs less than the RE20. The RE20 is either $399, $499, depends on what day of the week that you're looking at it. But either way, if you're looking at a 7B, you're looking at an RE20, consider it the microphone plus at least $100 for one of those amplification devices. A 286, the cloud lift is $150, the fed head's $99. I think the dynamite is a little bit less than that, but so you're adding cost. If you're going to be using this for a streaming situation, you may be looking at the DBX286 because it also has what you would normally use as plugins: the compressor, the gate, the equalizer of sorts in the DBX286S. It's an enhancer. So you can see I've configured the compressor. It's doing a little bit of compression here with the lights that are lighting up. I've got some enhancement added, added a little bit of bass to the voice, and I've added a lot more high end because I think this microphone lacks some high end. I've got a gate to take away any background, any hiss that might be inherent in the microphone. I've got a gate configured, and I've got the output boosted up a bit because this microphone requires that gain. So the preamplifier is set high, and the output way down at this end is set up high, so I can get a nice loud signal out of this. It's doing all the processing. There's no plugins being used here in the software. It's all being done in hardware, and all of a sudden, this microphone sounds a lot different. Better? I don't know. There's a lot more tweaking that we could do here. I experimented with it for all of 3 minutes before I hit record. But the point I'm trying to make is these two pieces of equipment together, the DBX286 plus the Q9U, is about the same price as those more heavy-hitting microphones. So it's something to contemplate. I think that's where the value proposition is here. You can get into these two pieces of equipment for the same price as the more expensive microphones. Yeah, this doesn't sound like those microphones. And, probably if you made it this far in the video, you're like, there's probably a whole bunch of comments that say it doesn't sound anywhere near as good. I'm not buying it. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's necessarily fair at the $199 price point to say that it's not a 7B, because it's not a 7B. It doesn't purport to be. So I think that there's at least an opportunity to consider the microphone for its price, for its capability. The fact that you can start at $199 with just USB and then go up to add an interface, switch it to XLR, then add the 286. You can do that over time. And I really think that is a different value proposition for this microphone. So I wanted to include that as a thought and as the closing remarks. I think it's really where this microphone has a chance to shine. You can decide whether or not it's right for you. It's not for me to decide. I just want to tell you some of the possibilities that are there and where I think the microphone can do some good. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. So now you've seen it with the USB mode, a regular interface compared against some other microphones, and now with the DBX286 to kind of create the total package. I hope that helps. I hope that helps if you're thinking about this microphone. I hope it helps. Let me know in the comments. But now, go out, get yourself a microphone. Any microphone. Maybe a dynamic microphone. Maybe a dynamic microphone with some outboard equipment to try and give it some oomph. But get yourself a microphone so that you can get out there and you can record something amazing. Thanks. We'll talk to you next time. Take care.